And when the opponent gets greedy, things get hard. And Pawniard about to put this ducklet in the graveyard. What is going on, everyone? Ox here with another video. If you're new to the channel, we do upload Pokemon Go content mostly related to PvP. And if you're a returning subscriber like Bra, thank you for the support. In today's video, we are taking a look at some battles in the Little Cup with a very powerful team, which has helped me to climb close to 400 ELO so far this week. Now, when compared to some of the other teams that we have featured so far this season, this team right here is extremely meta relevant, with two of the best Pokemon in Seel and Bronzor, but the main weapon is the Pawniard, which unfortunately is also the most difficult one to obtain. Pawniard can only be hatched from a 12-kilometer egg, and in order to get one with a CP low enough for the Little Cup, it needs to be hatched from a low-level account and then acquired through a trade. But as you're about to see, it is definitely worth trying to get your hands on. So jumping into these battles, we have a team consisting of a Pawniard lead, Seel, and a non-XL Bronzor. This Bronzor is only level 39, and the best thing about this team is that there is not one single Pokemon within this meta that could threaten all three of these Pokemon. So you may be thinking, with Pawniard and Bronzor, a double steel team, this team is going to be ABA weak to fire and ground types. The thing is, Bronzor is actually so broken that even against a ground or fire type, it's often going to win that matchup. So in the case where you do see a fire type in the lead, you're going to want to swap out into the Bronzor. So in this first battle, we are leading Pawniard into Jupiter. We swap out into Seel. I was previously running Ducklet in the place of Seel on this team, utilizing it as the safe switch in order to lure out the opposing Bronzor, at which point we would trap it onto the Pawniard. But over time, I did realize that Seel is actually a much better option for this cup. It honestly doesn't have any real hard counter within this meta, so I would highly recommend building a Seel for the Little Cup because it is definitely one of the safest picks. So the opponent is running Poliwag, which has access to Mud Shot and Mud Bomb. This particular Poliwag, however, is running Bubble Beam plus Body Slam, which means that Bronzor is going to absolutely dominate this matchup. But they swap out into Torchic, and a fire type is not what we want to see with two steel types left in the back. But Bronzor is literally too much for this Torchic, even against a fire type holding its own. After forcing the second shield, we are going to swap out into Pawniard, and the hope here is that we could just get to a Night Slash, take care of this Torchic, and then finish off that Poliwag with the Bronzor. Now, if this Poliwag was running Mud Bomb, this endgame would be a little bit trickier. However, with Bubble Beam and Body Slam, even if they bait the first time, the Body Slam is not going to be enough to KO, and this is going to be a very comfortable finish despite the very low HP. So even in that endgame with two Steel-type Pokemon against a Mud Shot Poliwag and a Fire-type Pokemon, this team did a pretty good job in making the opposition look like the Dallas Mavericks, a team with no answer on defense. So jumping into the next battle, we have Pawniard into a Shadow Alolan Sandshrew. This is a positive matchup because Pawniard is going to win on these CMP ties. However, the one thing you will notice about Pawniard is that it is a true glass cannon, and even against a resisted Night Slash, you are going to be forced to burn a shield. Now, the opponent does make a nice play catching this Night Slash onto their Seel, but this damage is going to make it a lot easier for Bronzor to come in. So before swapping out, I'm going to build up to another Night Slash first. Pawniard is very dangerous when it has energy ready to go, so I will simply throw one Psyshock here and then commit to straight confusion damage. Because of that Night Slash damage from the Pawniard, we are in no risk of losing switch advantage here, and we'll have some energy ready to go on this Bronzor for when the Alolan Sandshrew comes back in. Now, Sandshrew did make a move before swapping out, but even as a non-XL Bronzor, we still tank this Night Slash very comfortably. The opponent now swaps out into Dino. We are going to throw this Payback, then swap out into Pawniard, which has an X-Scissor ready to go. And a lot of times, they don't know about that bug type move. Bang! There it is. And in this particular situation, it really did not matter what the opponent did, because even if they did shield up that X-Scissor, Seel would be able to then come in with these shields down and take out the Dino with an Icy Wind for the knockout. So once again, this is just taking advantage of a core which really doesn't have too many answers to it. Seel and Bronzor are two of the strongest Pokemon within this meta, and as you're seeing from this video, there really isn't too much the opponents can do, especially when paired with a Pawniard in the lead. So next battle we have Pawniard into Shelmet. This is not a great lead for Pawniard, but we have two good answers in the back. So we swap out into Seel. Opponent is going to throw a body slam and then swap out into their own Seel. In this particular scenario, throwing the body slam is going to guarantee that they'll be able to maintain switch advantage. So when I find myself in a situation like this, I'm just going to go straight Icy Wind right here. All I want to do is lower the opponent's attack so that when Pawniard comes in, especially because it is a glass cannon, I want the opponent's attacks to be doing as little damage as possible. So I will now come back in with the Pawniard, fully intent on farming up some energy against this Seel, but the opponent gives up switch and swaps out into their Shelmet. So we are going to swap out into our Bronzor, which is a very comfortable matchup, especially with this much difference in HP. Shelmet can only really threaten Bronzor if they lower the defense with Bug Buzz, but otherwise it's a very comfortable matchup for Bronzor. So we are just going to look to farm up some energy here with the Confusion. Shelmet is going to throw the Bug Buzz and the defense actually does drop. So at this point we have Bronzor becoming more and more like Harry Maguire or the Dallas Mavericks, no defense, which is a bit unfortunate because these licks are going to be adding up now, and the opponent ends up having a Wooper in the back. So we're going to throw a Psyshock then swap out immediately. The unfortunate part here is that Pawniard actually has a pretty poor matchup against this Wooper. So the only hope we have remaining at this point is to outpace the two Night Slashes, force both of these shields, and then hope that Bronzor with a shield could outpace to a Psyshock and take out this Wooper. Now we get the attack boost here, and that may have triggered some nerves in the opponent and possibly have given us our only win con here with the opponent dumping some energy. I'm pretty sure if they committed to the mud shot down, they would be able to throw back-to-back moves and take us out. But instead we get that non-XL Bronzor coming through clutch with that 1 HP, just like that San Diego State buzzer beater against Florida Atlantic in the NCAA Final Four. Pawniard into a Shadow Alolan Grimer, and the opponent swaps out into a Vullaby. And this is another Pokemon like Pawniard, which I believe can only be attained through a trade with a lower level account. I don't think you could find one of these under 500 CP any other way. And Vullaby definitely caught me by surprise, and I kind of got a taste of my own medicine right here because I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I guess in hindsight it would probably make most sense to stay in with the Pawniard, play out the two shields, but swapping out into Seel actually works out fine. The part in which I threw this match was when I decided to shield up the first move. That is definitely a mistake, because if they bait with foul play, I'm automatically losing from that point on. The initial Brave Bird would not be enough to take out Seel, so I either call the foul play bait and preserve a shield, or they go for the Brave Bird, we survive, and they lower their defense. Regardless, the battle moves on. We are able to catch this Aqua Tail onto a Bronzor, and the opponent is not going to be able to throw an Icy Wind, which means that our attack is not going to be lowered against this Alolan Grimer. At this point, there is a potential win con, but we need to be able to force the final shield from this opponent, and then Pawniard is going to have to survive these bites, while also committing to taking out this Grimer with Fury Cutter, at which point we will have a Night Slash ready to go, and Pawniard is going to win CMP tie. And just when you thought the game was won with a 5-head play, Niantic comes out here with the Tottenham Hotspur, choking in the 90th minute, not allowing us to click the Night Slash. Lick comes through, and we end up losing that one in heartbreaking fashion. We move on to the next, Pawniard into Dino. This is a great matchup except in the two shields. Opponent swaps out into Shelmet. We're going to come in here with the Bronzor, and this is a very lengthy match, but for the most part, Bronzor should be winning this in most situations, unless the opponent is getting a lot of defense drops with the Bug Buzz. Now you could also run Bronzor with Tackle in this meta. It is going to give it a better matchup against Dino, opposing Bronzor, and the Dark types. The main reason for me running Confusion instead is because it performs better against Seel, and I find that in my battles, Seel is one of the more difficult Pokemon to deal with. Having Pawniard on this team provides great coverage already for Bronzor and Dino, so I feel that when paired with Pawniard, running Confusion makes a lot of sense. Now unfortunately right here, although we do have a move ready to go, we are not going to be given the option to throw, which means we are forced to burn a shield. The opponent swaps out into Bronzor, and we are absolutely loaded on energy. This is the Pawn Trap in full effect. And once the opponent decides to no shield this second Night Slash, we're going to swap out into the Seel, commit to the lick down, and at this point, Dino is going to have no other option but to shield up this Icy Wind while having its attack lowered. No reason to shield the Seel at this point, just let it go down, come in with the Pawniard and a shield. Generally speaking, when the opponent does have 2 shields left, there is never a reason to throw a charge move. The only reason I'm doing it here is because there is an opportunity for an attack boost with the Night Slash, which in turn would increase the damage coming from Fury Cutter, but in this particular case, it wasn't necessary. As you could see, Fury Cutter is overkill, and Pawniard is showing Dino just whose yard this actually is. Pawniard into Grimer. This time it is not a shadow form, so we are going to stay in here with the Pawniard, go for this X-Scissor, see if the opponent wants to shield this up. Once again, the problem with Pawniard is that it is a glass cannon, so we're going to look to catch this move onto the Seel. This crunch, despite being resisted, would do more damage to the Pawniard than it does against the Seel. It would look like I got a little bit greedy here going for the lick down, but I did not want to risk losing CMP tie on the Aqua tail, so that ended up being the correct play. And the next big decision was deciding whether or not to shield. I decided to shield, and that also ended up being a good play because the opponent ended up having a Why Not in the back, and Why Not is one of the hardest counters to Pawniard within this meta, so we definitely want to keep it away from that. Unfortunately for us, however, when we come in with the Bronzor, the opponent swaps out into a Shadow Stunky, and with a shield advantage, Shadow Stunky is actually going to have a decent matchup here against the Pawniard. Not being able to reach that second move there with the Pawniard is a huge blow for us, because now we are left with no other choice but to try and confusion this Stunky all the way down. We are able to do it, but they also got the defense drop with the crunch, which means that we are left with practically no HP right here. And even in a matchup where PvPoke says it has no chance, the opponent says, why not, and wins the battle. So even though this is a very powerful team, we are still going to lose some battles. No team is perfect. Let's hop into the next one. We got Pawniard into a Shadow Vulpix. This is a pretty awful matchup, so we swap out into Bronzor. The opponent is running Quick Attack on their Vulpix. They swap out into a Shadow Stunky. We're going to go for the Psyshock right here. They're going to shield up the first move. Ideally, we will be able to reach a second Psyshock right here, and thankfully, we are able to do that. Stunky is going to let that second one go through. Bronzor, as busted as it already is, also has access to steel type charge moves, so it's not all smooth sailing for Stunky in that matchup. And in case you're wondering how much a resisted Shadow Crunch does to a full HP Pawniard, there you go. Quite a bit of damage. We are able to Fury Cutter down. Opponent comes in with Shadow Vulpix. Because they're running Quick Attack, we could stay in here and throw a Night Slash before swapping out into the Seel. We are going to shield up this Body Slam because Shadow Vulpix does hit quite hard, and the opponent is going to swap out into a Bronzor, which is running Tackle. So this is definitely a winnable matchup here for the Seel, especially with an energy lead. Going to shield up the first charge move here, which would be doing the most damage before we start hitting this thing with a couple of Icy Winds to lower the attack, at which point Seel should be able to lick its way to a victory here against the opponents. Going for the Aqua tail, that is going to force the final shield from the opponent. The damage coming from Bronzor right now is not that much. They swap out into Vulpix, which allows us to lick all the way down. We are going to get to another Aqua tail, and it was at this point in the battle where I actually almost threw. Expecting them to have a move ready to throw, I swapped out into the Pawniard to catch. If they tackled all the way down, perhaps they could have taken out my Seel after with a Payback. Thankfully, they decided to leave the match instead, and we take the win. Next battle, we got Pawniard into another Shadow Alolan Sandshrew. Once again, Pawniard is winning CMP tie in this matchup. We should be reaching our charge moves at pretty much the same time, so if we throw on CMP, Pawniard is going to win each time. Pawniard, as mentioned, is a glass cannon, so unfortunately we do have to match shields even against a resisted Night Slash. And the opponent thinking they could survive is a big mistake. Bang! There it is. And to make matters worse for them, we get the attack boost. They come in with another Shadow, this time a Ducklet, going for the Night Slash. This time they are going to shield it up. And when the opponent gets greedy, things get hard. And Pawniard about to put this Ducklet in the graveyard. Bang! There it is. back-to-back knockouts, and it's a dino in the back, so they are lucky that a boosted Pawniard did not get its hands on that too. That right there was the perfect example of just what kind of damage this little pawn could do when it gets to the other side of the board. Next battle, and we got Pawniard into Bronzor, finally the battle everyone has been waiting for. And believe me, this battle happens very often in the lead. The opponent makes a nice catch onto a very spicy pick, Lick-a-Tongue in the little cup. We're just going to build up to another Night Slash and then swap out into the Bronzor, catch a resisted body slam, and because Lick-a-Tongue is so low, we could actually confusion all the way down. No charge moves are threatening the Bronzor here, only the lick damage. And Bronzor is going to exit this matchup with a lot of energy ready to go, so although the opponent is running tackle on their Bronzor, we are going to be able to deal a lot of damage here with these paybacks. And even after they take us out, they're going to have to throw some energy. Pawniard will be able to come back in, and we are going to have Seel, one of the best Pokemon in this meta, against whatever they are hiding in the back. Pawniard comes in, we throw the Night Slash, and they swap out into an Igglybuff, which actually could be a little bit problematic here for the Seel because it does have access to Wild Charge. So we're going to shield up the first move here. They go for the Body Slam. We are throwing the Icy Wind, looking to lower the attack right here, and the opponent is building up to another move. And I am not going to lie, the reason I did not shield here is not because I made a great call, and I am not going to lie. The reason I did not shield here is not because I made a great call, it is because I simply had no idea this thing could even learn Wild Charge. So in a sense, I actually got lucky from not knowing the moveset, and it paid off in this case. But definitely got a bit lucky there from not knowing the moveset, I guess. We come in with Pawniard, the opponent swaps out. At this point, we need to shield up this move, build up to 2 Night Slashes so that we could throw back to back. The first one, of course, will take out the Bronzor from this range, and the second one hopefully will be enough to take out the Igglybuff despite being resisted. If they reach a Body Slam, Pawniard is so glassy that it will be taken out. Thankfully, that Night Slash was enough, and unlike Luka and Kyrie on the Dallas Mavericks, on this team Pawniard can win without any defense. Pawniard into Drifloon, a Dark type into a Ghost, so the opponent swaps out into Seel. We are going to throw a Night Slash here and then swap out into the Bronzor. Just want to maintain the alignment right here. We will have 2 good answers still to that Drifloon in both Seel and the Pawniard. Now because of that Night Slash damage, we could actually commit to farming up this Seel, leave this matchup with a bunch of energy, and Payback is going to be hitting Drifloon for super effective damage. Even after the attack debuff from the Icy Winds, this is going to be dealing a lot, so the opponent has a decision to make: come in with the Drifloon or reveal the third Pokemon. They come in with the Drifloon. They are going to tank that Payback, dealing a bunch of damage, going to be able to reach the Side Shock as well, which is going to force a shield from the opponent. And if they want to take out this Bronzor, they need to go for the Shadow Ball. Icy Wind will not get the job done and will actually allow us to reach another Side Shock. Does the opponent want to go down their second shield? No, they do not, putting all of their faith into Alolan Sandshrew. And in this particular battle, Pawniard will not even need to come back in, going to take a seat on the bench like Harry Maguire. The difference is this one is in a winning effort. And if you thought this win could not get any sweeter, we are also going for that 2 shield flex. Opponent doesn't want the smoke. Hopefully this video was able to show you just how powerful Pawniard is within this meta. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to obtain one at the current moment, but when it does become a regular wild spawn, you will already have an idea of just how OP it can be. I started this week at 2300, and at the time of this recording I am currently sitting at 2700, so plus 400 ELO with this team over the course of a week. Hopefully you all enjoyed this. If you did, please consider leaving a like and a comment down below, and I will see you all in the next video.